Welcome to Shadowproof. Evidence first, noise last.
Today, we will talk together about the little-known story of going to the moon. In 2004, the US president signed a decree calling for us to return to the moon by 2020. At that time, NASA gave an innocent response that made the whole world drop their jaws. Sorry, the technical knowledge for going to the moon 6 times before was lost due to various incidents, so everything has to be redone from scratch. This is really not a joke. NASA itself announced this information. Major media outlets like the New York Times and CNN also reported the same. NASA continued to explain, saying they had lost magnetic tapes with telemetry data, hardware, technical documents, tools, videotapes, lunar landing data documents, and lost this and that, a complete mess. Are we talking about NASA's data archive, or are we talking about my basement? Could it be that the world's largest aerospace agency is a place where things are piled up randomly without dedicated management staff? Actually, if you say that, my basement is better managed than you guys. At most it's a bit messy, but at least I know where to look for things when needed, not losing items. Those 6 moon landings were unprecedented achievements in human history, and you lost all the documents? Is this your attitude towards humanity's great feat? S core idea is, want to go back to the moon? Fine, give us money, we. Faced with such a ridiculous answer, President Bush agreed immediately, no problem, providing money. Time flew by to 2018. The US president changed from Bush to Obama then to Trump, yet still hadn't sent people back to the moon. The Apollo program started in 1961, and by 1969 had already sent astronauts to the moon, taking only 8 years. And now, Big Brother NASA, from 2004 to 2018, has taken 14 years, nearly double the time of the original Apollo program. Haven't you even caught up to the starting point of 1969? Could you really be that incompetent? There must be more to this story. So with that said, please lift your little finger and click the subscribe button for Shadowproof channel, so you won't miss even more fascinating stories later. Therefore, skeptics and conspiracy theorists, as if drinking an energy drink, got energized again and brought up the old topic that the 6 moon landings from 1969 to 1972 were fake. But they were all refuted by NASA one by one, because the main argument of the moon landing hoax theory is that the Apollo moon landing involved over hundreds of thousands of people and cost $25 billion, equivalent to over $150 billion today. At that time, the US and USSR were arch rivals. The Soviet KGB wouldn't miss any loophole. For such a huge event to be fake, even the slightest trace of fraud would have been exposed by the Soviets to mock Americanism. Catch any flaw. So why does NASA seem to have collective amnesia, forgetting everything? The more you think about it, the less sense it makes, so let. When the Apollo moon landing was carried out, it was during the peak of the US-Soviet Cold War, with the 2 superpowers intensely engaged in the space race. Before the Apollo program, the Soviet Union was ahead of the US in aerospace. On April 12, 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human in history to enter space and orbit the Earth. The US wasn't far behind. A month later, they also sent a cosmonaut into space. But this cosmonaut named Shepard only stayed in space for a very short time before returning to Earth. Thus, for the first time, the US lost to the USSR. The US wasn't satisfied. In July 1961, NASA sent another cosmonaut up. This time the duration was even shorter, only 15 minutes before S record. After trailing for over half a year, even though they tied with the USSR, NASA still wasn't. In that half year, who knows what amazing plans the Soviets had made. Moreover, what made NASA more anxious was that they still didn't have the rocket technology to truly send people into space. The 3 previous manned tests, though successful, used rockets not specifically developed for carrying people, but instead used the Redstone surface-to-surface ballistic missile. The engineers replaced the missile warhead with a spacecraft cannon that could hold a cosmonaut, made the simplest modifications possible, and launched the rocket like that. What did they need? To ignite American confidence and morale. Assessing danger was meaningless. The human body was the experimental tool. That was the situation at the time. The Apollo program was born at this moment, aiming to send people to the moon. This explosive news was an immense shock to the Soviets, who were still busy in low Earth orbit. In the first lap of the race, cosmonauts were wandering around low Earth orbit, within 400 kilometers of Earth, while the moon is 380,000 kilometers away, hundreds of times farther than low Earth orbit, a complete qualitative leap. And the most terrifying thing is, in just 8 years, NASA completed this entire qualitative transformation, successfully landing on the moon, leading the USSR's sudden space leap achieved on its own? Why this doubt? The first problem giving NASA a headache is how to block radiation. The spacesuit is the #1 essential for humans traveling in space. It's just clothing, in reality, it. With a spacesuit that fulfills these two functions, it can simulate an Earth-like environment for cosmonauts in the extreme conditions of space. It can maintain the cosmonauts' breathing at all times, maintain pressure and temperature balance around the body, protecting the cosmonaut from a harsh space environment. Additionally, the spacesuit's thickness must be under 2.5 millimeters, must be very light, and Jin Liang made the cosmonaut unaware of its presence. The earliest known spacesuit currently is the SK-1 model worn by Soviet cosmonaut Gagarin. Afterwards, the US and USSR successively released a series of new models, some of which were specially designed for Apollo. And here's the key point. Before Apollo landed on the moon, scientists continuously examined one issue: space radiation. All spacesuits before Apollo's moon landing were designed for low Earth orbit. Actually, it was the same after the Apollo program, because afterwards, the farthest cosmonauts went was to the International Space surface. Although considered outside the atmosphere, it hasn't. 600 kilometers from Earth, there's an area called the Van Allen radiation belt, discovered by scientist James Van Allen in 1958, hence named after him. The main function of this radiation belt is to capture high-energy particles from solar wind and cosmic rays, protecting the atmosphere. This area is filled with high-energy electrons and protons. Radiation formed by these particle streams poses extremely dangerous radiation hazards to the human body. Regarding this situation, to reach this area, radiation protection is mandatory. Otherwise, it's impossible to operate Earth's surface, after which the spacecraft will exit the protective zone of Earth. And then the journey to the moon will take over 8 days, during which astronauts will be constantly exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. Not to mention after landing on the moon, astronauts will leisurely walk on the lunar surface without the protection of the atmosphere and magnetic field, so they must rely entirely on the spacesuit to resist The Apollo project successfully completed 6 moon landings, and after the astronauts returned, all were full of vitality with no one showing symptoms of radiation sickness. So it can be confirmed that NASA's spacesuit design is of high quality and capable of completing radiation resistance tasks. Everyone is amazed that in just a few short years, NASA's scientists found the key to withstanding radiation, truly extraordinary. But by 2015, NASA's scientists seem to have collectively suffered from dementia, not only losing all technical information but even unable to come up with the idea of radiation protection. At this point, there's no need to save face. NASA publicly offered a reward for ideas, specifically on how to overcome radiation outside the deep space magnetic field. You don't need to do any work. Just propose an idea related to radiation protection, and if experts evaluate it as credible, you can receive $30,000. Finally, in June 2022, NASA announced it had found 2 companies with rich imaginations, ready to produce the next generation of spacesuits. It must be noted here that these 2 companies only provided conceptual ideas. As for when they can actually produce them, NASA doesn't dare to promise, only vaguely stating that it will be implemented by 2034. Moreover, not only do spacesuits need radiation protection, but spacecraft also require it to protect astronauts. NASA decided to award $175,000 to solve this difficult problem. This raises the question: who came up with the ideas for the previous successful moon landing missions? Some might think that China also has a lunar exploration program, with plans to send humans to the moon before 2030. So how does China solve the problem of radiation-resistant space? The answer is they don't have a solution yet and are completely unprepared, but no one's telling you. Perhaps Chinese aerospace experts are eagerly waiting for NASA to solve the problem first and then discover some special ingenuity of contemporary Chinese people. What for? Everyone can probably guess. The second major problem to overcome when landing on the moon is transportation payload. In the early 1960s, space technology was definitely in its infancy. Although some rockets could fly long distances, the navigation systems were still very. The payload of rockets at that time typically did not exceed 2 tons, as they couldn't send people to the moon and bring them back safely. Because sufficient fuel is needed, if not carrying people, it's fine. The rocket only needs fuel for one way. To carry people, the equipment is light and doesn't. However, carrying astronauts is a different matter. Safety must be ensured. More machinery is carried, and energy consumption increases dramatically. But NASA back then was truly extraordinary, inventing the Saturn V3. Saturn V is 102 meters tall, equivalent to a 36-story building, with over every part needs to be designed and manufactured with the highest precision and under those strict quality tests. S launch had to admit it didn't. The thrust generated by Saturn V could send a payload of 130 tons into low Earth orbit. Other rockets could only carry 2 tons. Saturn V increased payload capacity by 60. Even 50 years later today, Saturn V could still defeat all similar equipment. Taking low Earth orbit as an example, China's Long March 3rd V3 stage orbital rocket can carry about 20. SpaceX's Falcon Heavy Super Heavy rocket can carry 57 tons into space. Russia's Angara A5 can handle 24 tons, so to this day, Saturn V remains the king of payload. Even though NASA had mastered this key technology since the 1960s, by 2022 they had to research and develop it from scratch again. Isn't that strange? What could be the answer behind it? In the Solar System Supervisor Project video, we mentioned Tom Cohn, a senior engineer at McDonnell Douglas, published a book revealing that. In the 1960s, aliens deliberately transferred technology to humans. They selected some scientists to do certain tasks, and Tom Cohn was one of those chosen. Tom Cohn himself participated in the moon landing program and even designed a control launch pad for them. Additionally, Tom Cohn's book also mentions that in 1954, at Holloman Air Force Base, U.S. President Eisenhower personally signed an agreement with the Gray Aliens, allowing them to take humans on their spacecraft, conducting genetic transfer research. In return, the U.S. could obtain aliens. Of course, this is just Tom Cohn's statement. Everyone can treat it as a fictional, but he provided us with a different way of thinking. Here, we can also use our imagination a bit and add some details to examine why NASA in the past could accomplish impossible missions that is now so incompetent. Going back to 1961, this was the actual first-generation mainframe computer of IBM before the 7. It occupied an entire room and could execute about 100,000 instructions. Nowadays, a quad-core chip or higher could easily exceed its speed by 100,000 times. Can you imagine? The Apollo moon landing program was created under these conditions. Yet 50 years later, we today cannot catch up. The US and Soviet Union were the two countries holding the pinnacle of technology but crucial moon exploration technologies like this, spacesuits, rockets, and the lunar rover, didn't receive assistance from other countries. So the simplest and crudest explanation is that the US back then had strong external aid. Equipment delivered were finished products, or came with instruction manuals, or had advisors sitting nearby. And this kind of assistance at that time, the US couldn't get from any country on Earth. So why has NASA suddenly lost this technology now? It might be because for some reason the cooperation between NASA and alien civilization, or it might be due to some confidentiality clause preventing NASA from deleting these technical documents. Therefore, after 1972, NASA no longer had the capability to land on the moon, and remains so until today. To conveniently tell people this technology wasn't. That would be too embarrassing, so they evade, saying they accidentally lost the documents. So with current human technology, can we solve all the difficult problems to go to the moon? Optimistically speaking, it might be possible, using the knowledge we've accumulated over the past 50, to rediscover the externally aided technology from 50 to 60 years ago, but this still requires time. Thank you for watching. If you'd like, you can subscribe to watch future videos. Or if you have time, you can watch more videos from this channel.
If the proof convinced you, subscribe and open the next case.